In part 2 of the lecture, we will wrap up box and whisker plots and learn about how to determine variation, how the data varies from the mean. We were looking at a box and whisker plot, and we had determined how to get the interquartile range and to multiply that by 1 5/10 and then add it on to quartile 3 or subtract it from quartile 1, and that would give you values that would allow you to determine whether you had an outlier or not. When we look at measures of variability, we're thinking about terms like range, variation, and standard deviation. Your textbook doesn't talk about variation, but variation, you take the square root of the variation to get the standard deviation. To get the range, you take the difference of the greatest value and the least value in the data set. To get the standard deviation, there's quite a bit of arithmetic to do, and I'm going to show you how to get the standard deviation by hand, and then we're going to go through calculating the standard deviation using your calculators. If you have a graphing calculator, that's what I'm going to be using to model with. And if you have a scientific calculator, then you'll need to use your directions that came with your calculator to get your standard deviation. I have some data values. It's 10 days of temperature. It's 86, 84, 85, 84, 83, 80, 85, 86, 86, and 81. Those are our temperature values. To get the range, I'm going to take the lowest value, 81, and take it away from the greatest value, which is 86. So 86 minus 81 gives me a range of 5. Get the calculator here where you can see it. The stat key gives me the options of editing. I'm going to press enter. Now I already have some data values in list 2 and 3, so I'm going to enter these data values into list 4. Alright, so I have the 10 values into the list. I'm going to go to second, quit. I'm going to go back to stat, and this time I'm going to go arrow right to calc. I'm going to press enter for one variable statistics, and I have to tell the calculator where the list is that I'm wanting to use. So I'm going to do second, and then right above the 4 key I have list 4. So I do second, list 4, and press enter. What I have is X bar, which is 84. I have delta X and S of X. Both of those are standard deviations. S of X is the standard deviation if you are dealing with a sample. Delta X is the standard deviation if you are dealing with the entire population. So if we are looking at the temperature for 10 days in West Liberty, Kentucky, then we are looking at the population. That's all. That's all the temperature for those 10 days at a particular time of the day. So I would use the population standard deviation of 2. If I go down, I get the minimum value in the data is 80. Quartile 1 is 83. The median is 84 5/10. Quartile 3 is 86. And the maximum is 86. So that makes this very easy for us to draw a box and whisker plot, because we have the min, max, and the other 3 numbers that are required. Alright, so now let's go back to looking at the average. The average is 84. I need that number if I'm going to take the standard deviation by hand. And I want you to see what is involved in finding the standard deviation by hand, and it'll help you understand that the standard deviation is looking at how the numbers deviate, or how the numbers differ from the mean or the average. So let me write these numbers down in a chart. So this is our X values. Excel on your computers also has some statistics. It can calculate the stats for you. Minitab is a program that will calculate stats. There's several programs that you can put on your computer. Alright, so I have all 10 values, x values listed. The next thing I want to do, and I've already calculated the mean and found the mean to be 84. So we had to have that the mean is 84. I'm going to make a column where I take each x value and subtract the mean. So I have 86 minus 84 is 2. 84 minus 84, 0. When I get finished, if I add this column, I will get 0. So if I add this column right here, I'm going to get 0. So I'm taking each x value and subtracting the mean. In my next column, I'm going to take each of those answers and square them, because if I add them now, I get 0, but if I square them, those negative values will be positive. So 2 squared is 4, 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, negative 1 squared is 1, negative 4 squared is 16, and so on. So I'm squaring all of the numbers from the previous column. I'm going to add those up. I have 13, 16, 17, 33, 34, 35. Oh, I got 39 that time. 13, 17, 18, 34, 35, 36. Whoops, got 40 that time. I'm going to keep with 40. I think I lost that one there when I... Alright, so we have a sum of 40. There are 10 numbers, so I'm going to take 40 and divide that by 10. That gives me 4. Then I'm going to take the square root of 4, and that gives me the standard deviation. So I find the average, I take each x value minus the mean and square it, I add it up, I divide it by the number of values I have, and then I take the square root. So you can imagine, if you have a large list of numbers, how difficult that would be to calculate the standard deviation. It's not hard, it's just a lot of arithmetic. And if you type these into your calculator in the list, it zips out the standard deviation immediately. So that makes the work much easier and much quicker. I want to show you some other things on the calculator. Hopefully you will be able to see. The second stat plot, which is right behind this y equals key, is where I can go to get the bar graphs, the box and whiskers, the scatter plot. You have to tell the calculator which list you want to use. And you have to adjust your window of your calculator to match your data values. In my X, my lowest value was 50 and my highest is 90. This is the values that I have in another list 2. And I want them to be 10 wide. I could make them 8 wide, 4 wide. And then the Y value will be your frequency. And so you may have to adjust your frequency to match your data. So I chose this, and it creates the bar graph with only 4 bars. If I go back and change my window where my X scale maybe is 8 and I graph, then I'm going to have more bars. Or if I change my X scale to 5, I'm going to have more bars. Now notice also in the stat plot we could have chosen to do a box and whisker plot. The first box and whisker plot will plot the outliers with dots if there are any. So let me go ahead and do that one. So if we have outliers, we will see them. And so there you have your box and whiskers. And if you use your arrow key, let me take my arrow up to that, then we would be able to get that the median is at 70. And quartile 3 is 75. And then you can move over and get your maximum, which is 90, and go the other to get quartile 1 and the min. So the calculator will graph a box and whiskers, it'll graph a bar graph, and it'll also graph a scatter plot. Now in a scatter plot you have to have 2 sets of values. So I need to use, I have some data in list 1 and list 2, or list 2 and list 3, but I'm not sure that it's the same number of values. So whatever you put in list 2, say you have 10 values in list 2, you would have to have 10 values in list 3. Otherwise you cannot do the scatter plot. So I'll see, I may not have the same number of values in the list. But this is the scatter plot here and here. this will give you a line plot. Let's graph it and see. See the line plot? I'm going to have to change my window to make it look better. Maybe change it down to 5 on the Y, and then you can see the values maybe a little better. Okay, but I wanted to show a scatter plot, so let's see if I can get a scatter plot to show. This is going to use list 2 and list 3. See, the scatter plot has to have 2 data values, and I may get an error here. Yeah, I get a mismatch information because I don't have the same number of points in the list. Alright. You should work on the odd numbered problems at the end of section 7.2, and then we'll continue studying about measures of central tendency and measures of variation in our lab.